Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Today, we have the privilege of learning from and with Dr. Jeff Bergin, the VP of Research and Design at Macmillan Learning, and Dr. Lisa Ferrara, who leads learning research for Macmillan's institutional products within the LSI Learning Research Group at Macmillan. At this time, just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. If you have a question, please put that either in the question or the chat box, and I'll make sure that we take either breaks in between or that we come back to answer them before we finish. There will also be 3 poll questions, so if you are in front of your laptop, we ask that you participate in our interactive webinar. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Ferrara.
And I think we can advance the slide. Great. So we wanted to start with a very quick poll and just kind of learn who we have on the line. How many of you may be instructors or administrators, researchers, or have some other interest or capacity in this area. So please go a second and take a second and complete the poll, and we'll take a look at who we've got with us. Great. Okay, good. It looks like about a third of our attendees are instructors, a handful of administrators, and a bunch of other people. So I'm eager to talk with you about this topic. Just so you know kind of how I came upon this work and my interest in this work, I am someone who was formerly an instructor, and about 15 years ago, our department chair called a meeting with us to talk about what we could do to support institutional outcomes in terms of student persistence and retention specifically. And one of the ways that we ended up supporting outcomes, especially for first-year students, was to begin to really focus on attendance and calling students who weren't attending our classes, and doing that really from their initial absence. And we did this without having access to research on student success and without having access to any analytics. So it was a really blunt way of trying to encourage students to attend classes and to be able to understand a little bit more about why they may not be attending. And so I'm excited today to have access to a lot more research than I did at that time 15 years ago, and to be able to share with you some of the educational research around student attendance and how that affects outcomes related to student performance, persistence, retention, completion, et cetera, and some of the things that analytics can tell us and what you can do if this is an area of interest to you or to your institution. So on the next slide, you'll see a little bit about the team that Lisa and I work on at Macmillan. And this is a new team. It's about 2 years old now, and it's called the Learning Science and Insights Group. And it's a group of researchers who focus really in 3 different areas. One is the application of learning science, so developing frameworks and models based in educational research, and particularly in theoretical and empirical findings in the learning sciences. 2 is working really closely with students, instructors, and administrators to co-design solutions that work for them and address pain points, such as dashboards related to student attendance and student engagement. And then 3rd, a group of scientists who focus on educational data mining and a progressive series of impact research tests that help us to understand how students are performing and how we can optimize their performance both through pedagogy and through design. So those combined are helping us to drive better outcomes in Macmillan's products and hopefully better outcomes for students and instructors and institutions. And if you want to learn more about this work, at the end of the slide deck, we'll share our website, and it's got a lot of details around both the methodologies that we use and some of the results that we're finding. So that will be available to you at the end. One of the things that we're really proud about, and this is on the next slide, is being able to work with two groups of people who've really informed the approaches to the work that I just described. One of them is a Learning Research Advisory Council, and the other is an Impact Research Advisory Council, and those are comprised of experts in the learning sciences and in assessment and measurement. And one of those members is Dr. Liz Thomas, whose work focuses on student success and in particular student retention. And I've listed here a couple of the works that she is really well known for that I would encourage you to scan through if you're able to. The first one, Building Student Engagement and Belonging at a Time of Change in Higher Education, has been really helpful for us as we think about all of the different facets that go into student success, and in particular, how attendance can play a role in all of those. The next slide that you'll see is a model that she's put forward in that 2014 or 2012 publication, and it's called the Student Success Ecosystem. And I thought this would be a good place for us to start because it really shows all of the different aspects in higher ed that go into student success. And those include, of course, student services, the social opportunities that students have at institutions, and then, of course, the academic programs and classes that they're enrolled in. And at the very center of that is this idea of student engagement and belonging, which is really what is at the heart of student success, having that cultivated both within their academic programs and then through the other kinds of events and services that they are partaking in. And as we work to improve those outcomes, it's important to build capacity among students, among staff, and among institutional stakeholders and leaders to be able to improve each of those spheres. One of the key ways of focusing on that, of course, is attendance. And attendance is something that needs to be considered not just in terms of class attendance, but also in terms of attending those services and attending to social events on campus. So when we talk about attendance, we're really talking about wholesale attendance that students have across all of the various services that go into their success, not just attending a particular class. What we've learned in doing an initial scan of the research is that attendance does matter, and this may seem pretty intuitive or pretty straightforward, but there are 4 themes I wanted to share with you in a little more detail about how and why attendance matters. The first is that attendance does improve performance. And this may seem, again, pretty straightforward, but there are positive relationships between lecture and or class attendance and subsequent academic performance, but it's neither necessary nor sufficient to support performance, meaning that that attendance alone is not the only factor, and it's not even necessarily a sufficient factor in student performance, that we really need to go deeper and look at some of the individual performance aspects that may influence attendance. And one of those is the types of students who are attending or the segments of students. And maybe not surprisingly also, that relationship between attendance and academic performance is strongest for non-traditional students, in part because these are students who may not have access to some of the other resources that other students are much more able to access: information technology, mentorship, cultural capital, those kinds of things. And so this group, this particular segment of students, really benefits from attendance the most. Attendance may be a proxy for motivation. And what that means is, as we talk about attendance, we may not really find that we're talking about attendance. We may find that we're talking about other things like student conscientiousness or diligence. We might be thinking about how willing students are to actively participate in their courses, how good they are at time management, or how well they understand the expectations that an institution may have or a program may have, or that they should have for their own learning and for their own success. So it may not be attendance itself that we're looking at, but rather some of these other constructs. And therefore, it may be more useful for us to not focus on attendance so much, but to really begin to think more broadly about student motivations more generally. So what does attendance do? Often when you talk about attendance, people think about the connection being fairly straightforward to the mastery of knowledge, skills, and different attitudes that students may take. But it really is a little bit less about the content in a particular course or the content in a particular student activity, and a little bit more about some of the other material and information that happens in those programs. So what we found is that lectures actually provide students with a lot more than content. They provide students with information and orientations that they may not be able to access outside of these scheduled teaching times, even if they're in an online program or in some other kind of a self-paced, self-directed program. And that going to things that are scheduled really helps to orient them and to keep them on track and keep them understanding expectations. It also plays a really important role in student social interaction and in building affiliation and in building those senses of being connected that reduce the feelings of isolation that can then lead to lower attendance. So these are two really important things to understand when you think about the value, the overall value of attendance, as that it is giving students more than just access to instructional content or access to assessments. It's giving them very valuable information about learning and about their programs and in general and how to succeed. So one of the questions we had for you is, do you track and report class attendance either across your class or across the institution? And we're curious to see how many of you do. So if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to just answer this poll. Right, and let's have a look at the results. Right, so it does vary by department. And there are some of you who don't take attendance at all and some who are not sure. So that's really interesting. Interesting that there is no one who is only taking it up to a course census state. So very helpful to know. All right, and there's one more thing that I wanted to share on our next slide, and that is that student attendance is actually, and I think we have the slide coming up.
Can you not see the slide?
No, I'm still seeing the poll results. You might be trapped in a poll for a while.
The poll has closed, so it should let you off now. I'm not sure why it's pausing.
I'm not sure either. Let me exit full screen very quickly. Sorry, everyone.
And I'm going to go ahead and just share with you what's on the next slide. And that is that what we have found, and this may be kind of the most surprising finding in the empirical research is that attendance as a construct does matter to students. In fact, 75% of students do appreciate having their attendance taken. And I actually had this discussion recently with a group of instructors, and they were unsure about how students may feel about it, but when they reflected on their own experience, almost unanimously, they appreciated having attendance taken in classes that they went to in undergraduate or graduate classes. And so that actually was supported by the research. And there's sort of three reasons for why students appreciate this. First is that they, without having some kind of guidelines in place, they often don't know how to initiate help or to initiate communication around their attendance. So, those students who have kind of a sort of a legitimate excuse for an absence, which is often the case, don't have, in the absence of a policy, a good way of understanding how and when to communicate that and sort of the parameters around communicating it. They also feel that the lack of an attendance policy may highlight institutional problems. It kind of is a signal to them that maybe their attendance is not super important, and that can cause them to disengage. And then thirdly, it provides them a way, kind of a means of tracking their own accountability and motivation. So knowing that they have a certain number of absences that they can miss helps them be a little more strategic in their planning, and it helps motivate them to know that they're doing well and that they're on track and that they are participating. So it's kind of an overwhelming preference of students, and in a way a little bit surprising, but it has some very specific elements to it. And one of the things that Lisa will share shortly is on how that may differ by class size. So there are different areas where we see this changing a little bit in terms of how attendance gets monitored or gets recorded. But I think now I will turn over to Lisa Ferrara to talk a little bit about the analytics that can help us in terms of tracking attendance, and then some of the things that you can do either with or without those analytics.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff, for going over that research for us. So we've just heard why class attendance matters for learner content knowledge development, as well as metacognitive learning skills. Now that we've covered the value of attendance data, let's discuss how collecting attendance data and the use of analytics can help support student outcomes. So why bother with analytics at all if attendance policies inherently assist in making students more accountable for their learning? Well, because analytics enable intervention. Just taking attendance is a great first step, but analyzing that attendance data can provide both formative and summative indicators for creating effective and efficient interventions in an institution's student success initiatives. At Macmillan Learning, two of our key design principles for creating effective tools and platforms is to consider how to report data for supporting the most appropriate inferences and supporting effective action to be taken by you, the users of those tools and platforms. Analytics can enable institutional leaders and advisors to consider the bigger picture of attendance trends at their institution. This can also help student advocates proactively identify students who may need a heavier touch of support or intentional interactions. As instructors, having attendance data and analytics can enable you to identify and support students individually in your class, or make conscious choices about your attendance policies for the right size of your course as well. You can also compare attendance to other sections taught by other instructors and develop an understanding of best practices that maybe your department or your series of courses should adopt to support students. So collecting data is great, and we can conduct analytics on that data, but how do we identify students or aspects of our institutions that need intervention the most? By collating and analyzing attendance data, which can be cumbersome at institutions, especially when trying to collect data throughout the semester. So getting a hold of that information can be challenging, especially if you are taking attendance, trying to upload it to another system, and by the time that information gets uploaded and aggregated and analyzed, it could be really late in the semester. At Macmillan Learning, we're aware of this problem. We're building a new analytics platform called CIRC that is built on the foundations of that student success model that Jeff presented earlier in the phone call. and that can analyze attendance data collected from the iClicker product to assist in this endeavor. So looking at the attendance data that can be collected, there are kind of two different ways that we could look at this data. First, we could look at it by students, or we could look at it by courses. When analyzing student data, we know from research literature and from qualitative data analysis that we've conducted with faculty across the United States that when a student misses consecutive class sessions, it can be a sign that that student is experiencing one or more factors that are pulling him or her away from an institution. This is potentially putting them off course for successful completion of their secondary degree goals. If you are a faculty member, you may see these consecutive absence patterns within your own course if you have the capacity to collect and review your attendance data regularly to identify those patterns. And you may be able to take action by reaching out to the individual student or students that you're noticing fall into this pattern, or by adjusting some aspect of your course. But if you are a student advocate, such as an advisor, a success coach, even a residential hall director, your heuristic for identifying students who may need additional outreach or intentional interactions may require data from multiple courses. So having the ability to evaluate attendance data for students across their courses allows various roles at the university to take relevant action earlier in the semester, instead of waiting for the end of term for final grades to see a potential problem, or waiting until next semester when that student doesn't re-enroll. In these instances, attendance data serves as a metric that enables formative action as soon as attendance data is captured and patterns of concern are identified. So another way that attendance data can enable intervention is by analyzing attendance data trends by course. So for example, seeing multiple courses with absences in the same discipline may indicate that a department chair or dean need to further investigate either course prerequisites to see if students are able to meet those prerequisites, or if they have a substantial amount of prior knowledge in order to participate in the course at all. The degree pathways or the way that they have their program requirements set up, or maybe even class scheduling. We've heard examples of students who were missing class in one section of a course quite frequently, and when the university conducted further investigation, they found out that those students were in that section in particular because they lacked the calculus requirement to participate in the class to move on in the degree program. So the only way that they could take both courses at the same time is by registering for that particular course section. And they were in the calculus course as well. So these students were at an inherent disadvantage with the content, but then they were also struggling to keep up in the calculus class as well as an engineering class that they had registered for. So the program was able to take action on their scheduling and provide additional tutoring and remediation for those students in that section. So those metrics can be used in summative evaluations quite easily, but to make them useful as formative indicators, we may need a little more information. In CERC, our learning analytics team partnered with Product to investigate an algorithm that can forecast projected attendance after just 6 class sessions, resulting in forecasting the rate of change of attendance to give us context of how much we can expect attendance to continue to drop over time for a given course. Essentially indicates the overall trend in the course attendance to date. Negative values of the trend indicate that the course may see lower and lower values in the session attendance, and the lower the value, the steeper the drop in predicted session attendance. So, for example, a trend of 0 would indicate a course with consistent session attendance, but in this case, in this example screenshot, we see a -9 at the top, which indicates to us that there is going to be a significant drop of attendance throughout the course. Understanding the anticipated rate of change in course attendance earlier in the semester can have an impact on how quickly administrators or individual faculty may decide to implement an attendance intervention or conduct further investigation into the cause of reduced attendance. Given that attendance data can be useful, formative and summative measures, how do we act upon the results? Let's look at a few research-based approaches to interventions that you or your institution can take. First, it can help you set the right policy for your institution or your class. by taking attendance, as Jeff mentioned earlier, has differing effects based on the class size. So we see in the research is that in large classes, it's much easier for students to sort of hide or disappear or get lost in the shuffle among so many students. So taking attendance can actually lead students to feel more encouraged to come to class and feel like they are being supported by an instructor, as in their instructor will know if they're missing. But in small classes, so if you're at a community college or if you are teaching in the major courses and your class sizes are only 20 or so students, students actually expect that the instructor would notice if they were absent from class. And so taking roll call or passing around a sign-in sheet may put students off a little bit or feel like the instructor doesn't care about them as much. And so you can still take attendance in that class, but it just may need to be implicit, either through some activity that you assign students, which you can distill participation from, or attendance in that day's session, or some other way to note that they were in or out of class. Another way you can act upon this is to consider institutional opportunities that can draw students into class. So Jeff talked previously about providing value to students, or that student attendance provides a lot of value to students because they get interaction, they can develop interactions within the course with their peers, with their instructors. They can't necessarily get outside of class. And giving them high value content that can help them, in their final exams, really help them understand their chosen career path or major, be really useful to learners as well. So at your institution, I'd encourage you to work collaboratively across departments, with faculty, with administrators, to actually establish a standard or expectation of adopting models of teaching and learning that facilitate these positive class cultures, encourages active learning, and makes lectures valuable to students. Providing high quality lectures, again, might sound very straightforward and obvious, but knowing students can really see and tell how much effort an instructor puts into preparing for class. And so just ensuring that all of your faculty put forth that effort really sends the signals to students that they matter and that they should come to class to get that information. Fostering a class culture that can enable students to engage with professors easily is also something that we see across the research and can lead into active learning pedagogies like peer instruction or adding some in-class activity that allows you to take that attendance maybe implicitly, but also makes the course more engaging while the student is there. So speaking of active learning, we do have a question or another poll for you. How much does using class polling, something like an iClicker question, for example, impact class attendance? I'll give you just a minute to respond here. All right, let's take a look at the results. All right, so for those of you who did participate in this poll, it looks like most of you would predict that adding some sort of polling element to class would actually increase attendance. Up to what degree varies a little bit. It's about half and half, up to 5% or up to 10%. I'll try to get back to my screen. Okay, so what we actually see from some research that our learning analytics team participated in with our product development group is that by adding polling to a course, attendance improves by up to 10%. What you're looking at is a graph of, it's a histogram of course attendance. The y-axis is the number of courses, and the the x-axis is the course average attendance. So the blue overlay is with polling, and you can see that compared to classes of relatively the same size, attendance is up on average by up to 10%. So consider including those active learning methods in your class, even if it's as simple as adding polling questions to a lecture that you already have created. That gets you one step closer to an active learning pedagogical model and can really help students feel like they are developing those relationships and engaging in class in a deeper way. All right, so another way to act upon the data and the analytics that you can get access to is by going beyond attendance and focusing on student motivation, goal setting, and self-regulated learning strategies. So as Jeff mentioned earlier, attendance can sometimes be a proxy for other things, and quite often a proxy for motivation. So if you notice that students are not coming to class, research has shown that when students feel less motivated to attend a class, or they can't see the relevance of that class to their chosen degree goals, then they visit the learning environment less frequently. And that can also predict attrition in the program or the degree seeking opportunities as well. So student motivations do manifest in their behaviors. And if you find that students are missing class, reach out to them, because it may be that they don't see the value in the course. And that's something that as an instructor, you might be able to address as part of your lectures. Or as a department head, you might think about offering some additional programming to help educate students about what their career paths look like and how that content or those skills that they are developing in the required courses can actually apply to their life beyond college. Any of us who have been in the classroom will probably understand what I mean when I hear, and what we hear others mean when they say that students will do anything for points. But there's a little bit more to just that phrase than just providing an opportunity for points. Supporting students in setting performance goals and then creating opportunities for them to track against them throughout the semester or the course, and helping them to see themselves reach those goals can be very rewarding to students and help them to develop goal-setting behaviors that will assist them well beyond just your immediate course as well. Self-regulated learning strategies can help students overcome struggles with their time management, strategic planning, and some of that goal-setting work that Jeff talked about earlier as well. So consider adding self-regulatory or metacognitive components and goals to your educational initiatives, either within your department or your individual courses and classroom activities, to help students develop those lifelong learning goals and behaviors. So ultimately, attendance data, specifically student absences, are an opportunity to learn more about our students and how you can help them succeed at your institution. So consider absences as a learning opportunity and perhaps less of an opportunity to punish students or take points away from them. So to get the most out of your attendance data, be clear and consistent with your attendance policies. So if students know what is expected of them, then they're more likely to set those time management goals and strategize appropriately for their needs and all of the priorities that they're trying to juggle throughout the semester. Also, when students do miss class, consider student engagement theories such as integration, involvement, that sense of belonging that Jeff also talked about in relation to the student success model. Focus on understanding why students aren't attending and address the most pervasive reasons. To take action on that, or a good example of this is I was at the first year experience conference last week and ran into a gentleman who's the director of student affairs at a smaller community college. And he worked with faculty and departments to add a basic needs clause to all course syllabi. And basically that clause says, if there's something preventing you from attending and succeeding in this course, contact me directly. And what they learned that they had not planned on learning about is that there were specific issues that were really plaguing their unique population of students. One issue is that they had a high number of students with chronic illness, and another was food insecurity. And so they worked across their campus to come up with programs to help support students more broadly in those areas. They worked with their Center for Disabilities to get more note takers for students who weren't able to attend class on late notice due to flare-ups from fibromyalgia or some other diseases as well. And then they created a food bank on campus for students as well to help support them in their goals and to be able to come to class and focus on and learning and reaching those succeeding in those courses. If you can't find a reason for why students are missing class, or you want to be more proactive about removing barriers, think about ways that you can that situations may encourage absences and try to work backwards to proactively address those. So for example, if students might be, excuse me, if students are consistently late to the morning classes, maybe there's a reason with the bus schedule. They're just not able to get to campus on time, or commute is just really challenging. So think about, do I need to push back the start time of my morning classes, if you're scheduling, to allow students to be able to show up on time and participate in the course fully? That's one common example that we hear as well, that attendance data helps to inform the scheduling complications that a department or an institution may have. At the end of the day, we'd recommend avoiding punitive responses to student absences and focus more on attendance remediation. So if students are missing a lot of class, taking more points away from them or making it more difficult for them to succeed in the course may not be helping the situation. And it's definitely going to demotivate them on some level. So think about, is there additional tutoring that I could provide the students? Is there a way, we've heard from a lot of administrators that we've been interviewing that they would like to, and student advocates, if they see students missing so many classes in a row, they call them in and start to negotiate a withdrawal from that course before the student earns an F and they have a harder time sort of completing the class or fixing their transcript at the institution. And so think about ways that you can actually support that student to be successful throughout their higher education career and not just use it as a punishment method. So we've covered a lot, and I think what I want to do is turn it now over to Jeff and the meeting organizer to see if we have any questions that we can help answer.
Lisa, I am not currently seeing any questions in the chat box.
I would invite anyone to please chat in any questions or also ideas, recommendations, things that you may personally have experience with. I know that one of the questions that we get fairly frequently, there's actually two that have come out of these kinds of presentations and discussions that I'll share with you. One is when it comes to polling, and Lisa shared the research on how polling can actually really make some good improvements. Kind of what's the sweet spot for polling? And that sweet spot is about 3 to 7 poll questions per session, per class period. That seems to be, from some of the EDM work we've done, the kind of ideal to really foster engagement and to not make it sort of overkill, if you will. So about 3 to 7 items per class period seems to be a really highly effective range. One of the other questions that we get is around student self-regulation and how we can help students to be better self-regulators. It's one thing to be able to sort of work with administrators and with instructors to improve their approaches to attendance, but it's entirely another to help students understand the value and the importance and begin to make smart choices. So the things that we recommend, one of them is to be very clear with students on the attendance policies so they're crystal clear, and obviously the more continuity within a program or department, the better, so that they're not having to monitor and change among different programs. The second is for them to be able to really identify and understand the importance of attendance and see it as something that is important to their success for multiple reasons. And the more visibility we give students, the more helpful it is for them to prioritize attendance. And then the third thing that we recommend is for them to really become strategic in planning, meaning if they know that there may be a week that they're going to be out, or a week that they're going to have a lot of conflicting priorities, to plan for those absences and then plan for strategies to not be affected by those absences. So those are some ways, and I think if instructors can spend some time up front working with students to do that kind of self-regulation work, it can really pay dividends alongside the work that they may be doing using analytics or using some other approaches to help. Any other comments or questions that are coming through in the chat?
Yes, we have a comment. Just a comment. Using clicker data for attendance is a good idea, as adoption of polling will be easy and hence making class more engaging for students.
Excellent. Yes, I would completely agree. I would completely agree that it's there are numerous ways that instructors do use the attendance, use iClicker for attendance, and it can be a helpful way to do it in a less labor-intensive way. Lisa, anything that you would add to that?
I completely agree as well. One of the comments that I often hear when I'm talking about this work or conducting further investigation with faculty is that there's a big difference between students just attending, showing up to class, and actually participating and engaging in class. And I think that's some of the primary value of using the iClicker data footprint here for our analytics in our platform is that we can see, are they just attending, or are they actively engaging in the polling questions and other activities that we can send through the iClicker product as well? So I think there's lots of opportunity there, especially to reflect on, are my students passively attending course, or are they actively engaged while they're here?
Any other questions or comments coming in through chat?
No, not at this time.
All right, there's just 2 more slides we'd like to share with you in case you'd like to learn more about this work. So the first thing is that we are posting a series of Learning Science Foundations. In fact, one of these will be related to this very topic, and it will go onto our website. You can see the web address right down at the bottom of the slide. But we've also posted a series of active learning models, a series of data-driven instruction. Learning Science Foundations are coming soon, within about the next 6 weeks, and those will really be about using things like objectives, assessment, and analytics to improve instruction. And then there will be a student success series that is coming out shortly thereafter that will address some of the issues we've talked about today. So you'll be able to see the research, the citations, and some recommendations for both course design and course pedagogy. The other thing that I'd like to point your attention to is 2 white papers that we've published. One is around efficacy and the approach that Macmillan takes to impact research, and the second is around big data and how we can go beyond the hype into really using it to improve instruction and learning experience design. So I'd encourage you to check those out also on our website, and we'll be posting more white papers as the year goes on. And I think the closing slide may or may not, yep, it gives you our website a little bit more clearly, and there's ways for you to get in contact with each of us. So if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we're always happy to schedule time and talk in more detail about these or other topics.
And we actually do have one final question, and this is integrating attendance into, I'm assuming, Blackboard Learn in your roadmap. And it says, in fact, more specifically into Blackboard Learn Retention Center. That is a risk category in Retention Center for attendance.
That's a great.
No, Lisa, go ahead.
That's a great question. And if you want to email me directly, I can get you in touch with our product team to figure out where that is on the roadmap. I do know that the attendance data the iClicker data has some integration points with Blackboard, but I am not fully aware of all the integration points and how it can be uploaded to all of the Blackboard plugins and components. But if you'd be willing to send me an email, I can absolutely get that question answered for you.
Cool. Well, thank you again for taking the time to join us. And again, feel free to email us, and we welcome all comments or input or questions that you may have. But thanks so much for your time.